Chapter 7. Wealth Inequality, the Widening Gap. 7.1 The Roots of Economic Disparity. Wealth inequality in the United States is a multifaceted issue, rooted in a complex interplay of historical, economic, political, and social factors. Understanding the roots of economic disparity requires dissecting these varied influences to appreciate how they collectively contribute to the widening wealth gap. Historically, wealth in the United States was concentrated amongst a select few, primarily those who owned land or means of production. The Industrial Revolution ushered in an era where wealth generation was more dynamic, giving rise to new industries and opportunities. However, these opportunities were not evenly distributed, with certain groups being systemically marginalized. Industrialization marked the beginning of a trend that led to the current situation of wealth disparity. The creation of vast industrial wealth in the hands of a few proprietors, juxtaposed with the emergence of a large working class, set the stage for economic divides. Moreover, discriminatory practices, such as redlining and unequal access to quality education, have systematically disadvantaged particular demographic groups, particularly African Americans and other minorities. These institutional barriers have perpetuated cycles of poverty and impeded wealth accumulation in marginalized communities. The legacy of such discrimination is visibly reflected in today's wealth inequality. For example, opportunities for homeownership, a cornerstone of wealth building in America, have been historically skewed by factors such as racial discrimination and unequal lending practices. Homeownership rates among minority populations continue to lag, resulting in reduced wealth accumulation over generations compared to their white counterparts. This is accentuated by disparities in property values, generational wealth transfer, and investment opportunities that have been constrained by systemic inequities. The tax system also plays a pivotal role in the roots of economic disparity. Tax policies, including those favoring capital gains and inheritance, often benefit the wealthy disproportionately. These policies enable those with significant assets to grow their wealth more rapidly than those who primarily rely on income from labor, which is taxed at a higher rate. Consequently, such a structure perpetuates wealth concentration among the affluent while limiting wealth-building potential for lower and middle-income earners. Additionally, the globalization of the economy has introduced new challenges to wealth distribution. As companies increasingly outsource labor to lower-cost regions, there is a corresponding decrease in manufacturing jobs within the United States, which historically were a source of stable income and upward mobility for many working-class citizens. This loss of jobs has had a ripple effect on the domestic economy, leading to decreased job security and stagnating or declining wages for many workers, further exacerbating economic disparity. The education system, closely tied to economic outcomes, is another fundamental root of wealth inequality. Due to resource discrepancies between school districts, often along lines of socioeconomic status and race, there is a wide variation in the quality of education provided. Access to higher education also remains uneven, with the rising costs of college posing a significant barrier for low-income students. The culmination of these educational disparities results in differing lifetime earning potentials and perpetuates the cycle of wealth inequality. The financial sector is also a key player in the roots of wealth disparity. Practices such as predatory lending and subprime mortgages disproportionately target and affect lower-income populations, making it difficult for these individuals to accumulate wealth and contributing to financial instability. Furthermore, limited access to banking and financial services in underprivileged areas impedes the ability of residents to save, invest, and accrue assets. Technological advancements have contributed to economic disparity in several ways. Automation and advancements in artificial intelligence are replacing jobs in sectors like manufacturing and retail, often affecting lower-wage workers most significantly. Simultaneously, the tech industry has created immense wealth for those with the skills and opportunities to capitalize on these new technologies, leading to a new class of tech elites whose wealth rapidly outpaces that of average workers. The political landscape has a substantial influence on wealth inequality. Lobbying and campaign contributions, often from wealthy entities and individuals, can sway policies in favor of the rich. This dynamic has the potential to preserve existing systems that perpetuate economic disparities. Political decisions regarding minimum wage, labor laws, social safety nets, and funding for public services all have direct impacts on wealth distribution and influence the viability of socioeconomic mobility. Moreover, wealth inequality cannot be fully understood without recognizing the role of cultural perceptions. Societal attitudes towards wealth, labor, and social mobility shape policy and individual behavior. The belief in a meritocratic society can often overlook systemic injustices and attribute wealth accumulation to individual effort alone, ignoring the structural factors that facilitate or hinder economic advancement. In recognizing the deep-seated roots of economic disparity, it becomes clear that addressing wealth inequality necessitates a multifaceted approach. Only a concerted effort that includes policy reform, socioeconomic awareness, and direct intervention in the most affected communities can construct a more equitable economic landscape. Understanding the scale and complexity of this issue is fundamental to identifying effective solutions in creating a more balanced distribution of wealth. The consequences of unchecked wealth inequality are profound, impacting not only economic stability, but also the social and political fabric of society. As the gap widens, the risks of disenfranchisement, social unrest, and a breakdown in democratic processes also increase. It is critical to engage in continual assessment and implementation of measures designed to mitigate the roots of economic disparity. Such efforts require robust public discourse, evidence-based policy, and a commitment to a fair and just society. Addressing the roots of economic disparity is an imperative for the United States as it seeks to promote fairness, opportunity, and prosperity for all citizens. While wealth inequality is a global concern, the unique historical, cultural, and political context of the United States necessitates context-specific solutions. Through careful analysis and a willingness to confront challenging truths, progress can be made in unraveling the complex web of factors contributing to the wealth gap. The pursuit of economic equality is not only a moral one, but also a practical one, vital for the overall health and future of the nation. 7.2 The Growing Chasm, Wealth Gap Realities. Wealth inequality, also referred to as the wealth gap, is the uneven distribution of assets among residents of the United States. This term commonly refers to inequality among individuals and groups within a society, as well as disparities between countries. While the existence of wealth disparity is not a novel phenomenon, the acceleration and deepening of the wealth gap in the United States are leading to significant social, economic, and political repercussions. The extent of wealth inequality can be measured using various methods, one of which is the Gini coefficient. This statistical measure ranges from 0 to 1, where 0 signifies perfect equality, and 1 indicates perfect inequality, meaning one person has all the wealth and all others have none. Recent studies report the United States Gini coefficient to be on the rise, indicating a growing concentration of wealth. Additionally, data shows that the share of wealth owned by the top 1% of Americans is increasing, while the bottom 50% have relatively little. Demographic factors, such as race and education, have a significant impact on the distribution of wealth. The racial wealth gap, which exists largely between white households and households of color, particularly African American and Hispanic families, is a striking example. Centuries of systemic discrimination, unequal access to education, housing segregation, and disparate treatment by lending institutions have contributed to persisting wealth disparities along racial lines. Homeownership is a conventional pathway to building wealth. However, access to homeownership has historically been unequal. For decades, discriminatory practices such as redlining made it difficult for many minority families to buy homes and accumulate wealth. Although such practices are now illegal, their long-term effects are felt, with white homeownership rates significantly outpacing those of minorities and, in turn, contributing to the wealth gap. Education also plays a pivotal role in wealth accumulation. Generally, higher educational attainment is associated with increased earnings, which can allow individuals to save more, invest, or purchase assets that appreciate in value. Disparities in educational opportunities due to factors like school funding, geographic location, and socioeconomic status contribute to the uneven distribution of wealth. In addition, student loan debt disproportionately affects lower-income students who pursue higher education in hopes of economic mobility, often hindering their wealth-building capacity post-graduation. Employment and income disparities directly influence wealth inequality. Wages have stagnated for a significant portion of the workforce, especially when adjusted for inflation, and this stagnation affects the middle and lower brackets of earners. Simultaneously, executive compensation and incomes for the highest earners have soared. This disparity in income growth exacerbates wealth inequality, as it allows the richest to invest and compound their wealth, while others struggle to cover basic expenses. The role of taxation policies significantly affects the division of wealth. Tax structures, such as reduced rates on capital gains and the stepped-up basis loophole, tend to favor the wealthy, as they reduce the tax burden associated with the transfer and growth of large fortunes. Conversely, lower-income individuals typically see a higher percentage of their wealth and income go towards taxes, as they often rely more heavily on wages, which are taxed at higher rates than investment income. Wealth accumulation is also influenced by inheritance and intergenerational wealth transfer. Families with wealth pass on advantages such as property, stocks, and high-quality education, further entrenching wealth disparities. Those without such familial wealth must rely on their income and savings to purchase homes, finance education, and handle emergencies, often leaving little left for wealth accumulation or investment. Consumer debt is a substantial barrier to wealth accumulation in lower-income households. Predatory lending practices and high-interest credit products drain resources from these households, making it difficult to save or invest. Moreover, borrowers from minority groups often face steeper costs for their credit, exacerbating the wealth gap. Just as wealthy individuals can use debt to leverage investments and a further increase in wealth, high-interest debt can trap lower-income households in a cycle that stifles wealth building. Investment in assets such as the stock market or property tends to grow wealth more quickly than savings accounts or other low-risk financial vehicles. A considerable proportion of American wealth is tied up in such assets, and the growing stock market has disproportionately benefited the wealthiest, who have more capital to invest and thus earn larger returns on their investments. This has resulted in an increasing disparity, as those with little disposable income cannot afford to risk investment in higher-yielding assets. Public policy plays a decisive role in either mitigating or exacerbating wealth inequality. Policies that encourage wealth accumulation among the middle and lower economic strata, offer strong social safety nets, and promote fair wages can help close the wealth gap. Conversely, policies that prioritize the economic preferences of the wealthy can serve to deepen the divide. A broader debate continues regarding the extent to which the government should intervene to rectify wealth disparities and what methods ought to be employed. The implications of wealth inequality extend well beyond individual households. A large wealth gap can lead to a variety of social issues, including reduced social mobility, increased rates of poverty, and higher stress levels that can lead to poor health outcomes. Furthermore, a society with significant wealth disparities faces the risk of decreased consumer demand, as a broader segment of the population lacks the disposable income necessary to purchase goods and services, which can lead to slower economic growth. Political power and influence are frequently discussed in tandem with wealth inequality. Campaign finance in the United States often favors those with more financial resources, as they can contribute more significantly to political campaigns and lobbying efforts. This dynamic can lead to policies that favor wealthy interests, thereby perpetuating the cycle of wealth concentration and marginalizing the political voice of the less affluent. Climate change and environmental issues also intersect with wealth inequality. Often, wealthier individuals and nations are more capable of adapting to and mitigating the effects of environmental disasters, while poorer communities and countries cannot. This disparity heightens the vulnerability of the less wealthy and can lead to disparities in health, livability, and further economic burdens. Finally, the cultural and moral elements surrounding wealth inequality feed into larger debates about the ideals of fairness and justice within a society. The enduring notion of the American dream, that hard work leads to success, is challenged by the realities of the wealth gap, raising questions about equality of opportunity and the actual accessibility of upward mobility. Understanding the complexities of wealth inequality necessitates considering the myriad factors contributing to its persistence and growth. It is a multifaceted issue that touches upon economic structures, social identity, policymaking, and global dynamics. The continuing discourse on wealth disparity is reflective of deep-rooted concerns within American society regarding the nature of prosperity, justice, and the sharing of resources. As the wealth gap continues to widen, the urgency for policies designed to bridge it only intensifies, with far-reaching consequences for the fabric of the United States. 7.3 Tax Policy, a tool for equity or division. Tax policy has long been a flashpoint in American politics. It encompasses a range of issues, including how much citizens should pay, what the rates should be, what activities should be taxed, and whether the tax code should be used to address economic inequality. Tax policy can be a powerful tool for achieving a number of social objectives, including redistribution of wealth and funding of public services. The tax code is frequently adjusted, with each change sparking debate over its fairness and efficacy in addressing wealth inequality. The U.S. operates under a progressive tax system, which means that those who earn more money pay a higher rate of tax on their income. This system is grounded in the belief that those who are better able to pay should carry a heavier tax burden, and that this can redress imbalances in wealth distribution. However, detractors argue that such a system can be punitive to success and innovation, inhibiting economic growth and entrepreneurship. The crux of the debate often lies in determining at what point tax rates become unreasonable and counterproductive. Tax exemptions and deductions are elements in the tax code that effectively lower an individual's or a corporation's taxable income. They are often designed to encourage certain behaviors or provide relief for specific situations, such as charitable donations or mortgage interest deductions. However, critics point out that these benefits are more easily accessed by those with higher incomes, who are more likely to have the kinds of expenses that qualify for these deductions, or the resources to hire professionals to navigate the complex tax code. This can perpetuate inequality, as lower-income individuals gain relatively less from such provisions. Corporate taxes also play a role in the discussion of wealth inequality. Companies with robust financial resources can often find ways to minimize their tax liabilities through loopholes, overseas investments, and strategic financial planning. This can result in instances where large profitable corporations pay no federal income taxes, which raises questions about the fairness of the tax system. Some argue that this concentrates wealth among the owners and shareholders at the expense of the wider society, which relies on tax revenues for public services. Capital gains taxes are levied on the profit from the sale of investments, such as stocks or real estate, when these are held for more than a year. They are generally taxed at a lower rate than ordinary income. This preferential rate is justified by the claim that it encourages long-term investment in the economy. However, since these types of investments are more common among the wealthy, lower capital gains tax rates have been criticized for contributing to wealth inequality by offering a tax advantage to the rich. Estate taxes or inheritance taxes are taxes that are levied on the transfer of the estate of a deceased person. Supporters of estate taxes argue that they prevent the perpetuation of wealth across generations, thereby limiting the formation of dynastic wealth and promoting a more meritocratic society. Critics claim that estate taxes are unfair to families who want to pass on the fruits of their lifetime's work to their descendants, and may force the sale of family businesses and farms. Attempts to use the tax code to address inequality include proposals for wealth taxes, which would impose a tax on the net worth of individuals above a certain threshold. Proponents argue that this would target the accumulated wealth of the ultra-rich and could significantly reduce wealth inequality. Opponents counter that such taxes are difficult to implement, discourage wealth accumulation, and could lead to capital flight. Tax credits are another feature of the tax system that can help reduce inequality. Unlike deductions, which reduce the amount of income subject to tax, credits reduce tax liability directly. The Earned Income Tax Credit, EITC, for instance, is designed to benefit working low-income families and is credited with lifting millions above the poverty line each year. Enforcement of tax laws, including audits and investigations into tax evasion, is critical to the effectiveness of any tax policy. If enforcement is lax, wealthy individuals and corporations may evade taxes, eroding public services and exacerbating inequality. Ensuring that all pay their fair share requires adequate funding and support for tax enforcement agencies like the IRS. Tax policy debate is deeply intertwined with political ideology. Liberal policymakers often advocate for higher taxes on the wealthy and for corporations, with the aim of funding robust social welfare programs. Conservatives usually argue for lower taxes across the board, suggesting that this stimulates economic growth, which ultimately benefits everyone. The balance between these perspectives is highly contested and has significant implications for both governmental budgets and the degree of wealth inequality. The complexity of the tax code can be seen as a barrier to achieving tax fairness. Its intricacy allows those with the means to exploit its nuances, often leading to the accusation that the tax system is rigged in favor of the wealthy. Simplifying the tax code could potentially reduce such inequalities, but attempts at simplification face political challenges, especially when they threaten existing benefits enjoyed by powerful interests. Tax policy has far-reaching implications beyond the balance sheets of individuals and corporations. It reflects and shapes societal values and can influence the distribution of wealth and opportunities within a nation. As income and wealth disparities continue to grow, tax policy will remain a crucial battlefield where the struggle over the definition of equity and the vision for America's economic future plays out. The tax code is not merely a financial document, it is a moral map delineating the contours of the social contract between the government and its citizens. How it evolves will play a key role in determining whether it becomes a tool for equity or a wedge that deepens division. 7.4 Globalization's Winners and Losers. Globalization is a complex and multidimensional phenomenon that has significantly influenced the world economy and transformed international trade and investment patterns. The interconnectedness facilitated by globalization has led to an increase in cross-border economic activities, which includes the expansion of multinational corporations, the widening reach of technological advances, and the accelerated movement of capital, goods, services, and labor across borders. While globalization has indisputably contributed to the economic growth of nations and the overall global economy, its impacts on society are not uniformly positive. There are distinct winners and losers, and wealth inequality is one of the ways in which these disparate impacts manifest themselves. The winners of globalization are often those who own capital, possess advanced skills, or have the knowledge that can be utilized to take advantage of the expanding global market. Corporations with the capacity to operate internationally have tapped into global supply chains, accessing cheaper labor and materials, and entering new markets. These corporations typically see increases in profit margins, and thus reward their executives and shareholders substantially. Individuals with high-level skills and the ability to work in the global marketplace can command higher salaries and have more job opportunities. In many cases, these individuals live in developed nations or emerging economies that have a strong educational infrastructure and are technologically advanced. On the other hand, the losers of globalization tend to be those who have skills or work in industries that are easily replaceable or outsourced. This includes workers in developed nations who are employed in manufacturing, textiles, and various low-skilled jobs. As corporations seek cheaper labor sources abroad, these workers face job displacement and downward pressure on their wages. This not only leads to individual financial hardships, but also contributes to the de-industrialization of certain regions, compounding the social and economic challenges, such as increased poverty and reduced socioeconomic mobility. There is also a geographical dimension to the winners and losers of globalization. Developed nations, particularly the United States and countries in Western Europe, have been able to exploit the advantages of globalization more effectively than many developing countries. Despite some emerging economies, like China and India, demonstrating impressive growth and integrating into the global economy with success, there are numerous other developing countries that have not benefited substantially from globalization. Factors such as lack of access to capital, inadequate educational systems, poor infrastructure, and political instability hinder the ability of these countries to compete globally and attract foreign investment. The service sector demonstrates another aspect of inequality, as high-level professional services like finance, consulting, and technology have thrived under globalization. Employees in these sectors often experience improved working conditions, higher earnings, and more job security. Conversely, many service jobs that do not require a high skill level have become more precarious, with fewer benefits and lower wages. Although technology has enabled some to work from any part of the globe, thereby broadening their opportunities, it has also led to a surge in gig work, which often lacks the protections of traditional employment. Income inequality has been exacerbated by the tax policies adopted by some nations within the context of globalization. There is a tendency for countries to lower corporate tax rates in an attempt to attract multinational enterprises and their investments. This race to the bottom limits the resources available for governments to invest in social programs and infrastructure, which are crucial for reducing inequality. Moreover, the wealthy have more resources and opportunities to take advantage of tax loopholes and offshore banking facilities to reduce their tax burdens, further escalating wealth inequality. Trade agreements play a significant role in the dynamics of globalization. These agreements are often designed to benefit large corporations with the resources to navigate and exploit the rules, at the expense of small businesses and consumers. They can include provisions that protect intellectual property rights or investor interests, which may disproportionately favor developed countries and their corporations. Labor standards and environmental protections frequently receive less attention, placing countries with lower standards at a competitive advantage and prompting a regulatory race to the bottom. The concept of cultural globalization adds a layer of complexity to the discussion of winners and losers. While the spread of ideas, customs, and products can enrich societies, there is concern over cultural homogenization, where dominant cultures overshadow or displace local traditions and values. This cultural dominance often goes hand in hand with economic dominance, as large multinational companies spread Western consumer culture around the globe, overshadowing local businesses and cultural practices. The digital divide highlights another form of inequality within the context of globalization. Access to modern information technology and the Internet provides significant economic and educational advantages. However, a substantial portion of the global population still lacks reliable Internet access, let alone the skills to use it effectively for economic gain. This technological gap widens the wealth inequality, as the digitally literate and connected populations, mostly in urbanized areas and developed countries, have a profound advantage in tapping into global networks and opportunities. The impact of globalization on the environment has sparked debate and concern, as more economic activity has led to increased consumption and consequent environmental degradation. Wealthier nations and individuals can often afford to mitigate the impacts or adapt to changes, while poorer countries and communities are left to face the most severe consequences of environmental issues, like climate change, without adequate resources. The resulting social and political tensions from wealth inequality exacerbated by globalization are palpable. From rising populism in politics to protests and movements that aim to address the disparities, it is clear that the status quo is increasingly unsustainable. People's sense of fairness and opportunity is challenged by the reality that globalization has, in many cases, amplified economic polarities, leading to disenchantment and conflict. The consolidation of wealth and negotiating power in the hands of a few multinational corporations challenges democratic principles and the ability of states to govern in the best interest of their populations. With overpowering lobbying capabilities, these corporations can influence policies in their favor, often at the expense of the working and middle classes. This undermines the foundational notions of equality and fairness upon which many societies are built. Finally, the role of international institutions and global governance becomes crucial in addressing wealth inequality in the context of globalization. There is a need for systems that facilitate fair trade, protect labor rights, ensure environmental sustainability, and provide avenues for redress when multinational corporations overstep their boundaries. Although there are existing entities such as the World Trade Organization, the United Nations, and the International Monetary Fund, questions remain regarding their effectiveness and equity in representing the interests of diverse populations, including the least advantaged. 7.5 Technology's role in shaping modern economies. Technology has fundamentally reshaped the modern economy, its effects rippling across numerous sectors and influencing labor markets, industry dynamics, and the global distribution of wealth. The advent of digital technologies marked the onset of what is often termed the Fourth Industrial Revolution. These changes have facilitated the rapid exchange of data, revolutionized communication, and dramatically altered the landscape of many industries. While these advancements have generated new opportunities, they have also exacerbated existing economic disparities, giving rise to complex societal challenges. The integration of advanced technologies in business has led to significant gains in productivity and efficiency. Companies that successfully implement these technologies often see increased profit margins and market share. The most evident example is the consolidation of wealth among tech giants in the information technology sector. These companies, often referred to as big tech, dominate their respective markets, and the concentration of wealth they represent is significant. This phenomenon has accelerated wealth inequality, as the financial success of these companies has translated into considerable accumulation of resources and influence for a small number of stakeholders, often to the detriment of competitors and the broader workforce. One cannot discuss technology's role in the economy without considering automation and its implications for the labor market. Automation, enabled by advancements in artificial intelligence and robotics, has allowed machines to replace human labor in a growing number of tasks. This transition can lead to displacement of workers, particularly those in roles that involve repetitive or routine tasks. While some economists argue that technological advances ultimately create new jobs, the transition is not automatic, nor is it necessarily smooth. Workers whose skills are rendered obsolete may find it difficult to secure employment without significant retraining, and the jobs created by technological advancements may not be commensurate in terms of number, wages, or benefits. Simultaneously, technology has introduced new models of employment, such as the gig economy, characterized by temporary, flexible jobs often facilitated by digital platforms. The convenience and scalability of these platforms have created new avenues for income generation, but have also brought to light the issue of job security and benefits. Gig workers, who are classified as independent contractors, often lack the protections and benefits traditionally provided to full-time employees. This precarious form of employment, while providing flexibility, also contributes to financial uncertainty and lack of long-term economic stability for many individuals. The influence of technology on economies is not only felt through labor markets, but also through its impact on capital markets. High-frequency trading, powered by algorithms capable of executing transactions in fractions of a second, has dramatically changed the nature of stock trading, enabling large volumes of trades to be made very quickly based on computer models. While this can increase market liquidity and efficiency, it can also contribute to market volatility and raise complex ethical questions about market manipulation and access to technology, further enhancing the advantages of those with the resources to invest in and leverage advanced technologies. Another significant aspect of technology's role in wealth inequality is the digital divide, a term used to describe the gap between those who have access to modern information and communication technology and those who do not. Access to the internet and digital services has become increasingly critical for participating in the modern economy, yet many people around the world, and even within developed countries like the United States, do not have reliable or affordable access to these tools. This disparity limits opportunities for education, employment, and information, perpetuating cycles of poverty and economic disadvantage. Moreover, technology has also transformed the global economy, with some arguing that it facilitates globalization, while others say it promotes its decline. On one hand, technology allows companies to operate and compete on a global scale, which has led to the expansion of international trade and investment. On the other hand, as digital platforms and automation make it possible for production and services to be located anywhere, there is a growing trend of companies bringing operations back to their home countries, reshoring, due to the decreased importance of labor costs in production, which undermines some of the foundational principles of globalization. Education systems play a crucial role in equipping future generations with the skills necessary to thrive in a technologically advanced economy. Yet, there is growing concern that educational institutions are not keeping pace with the rapid changes in the job market. The skills gap between what students learn and what the job market demands is another factor contributing to economic inequality. Individuals from underprivileged backgrounds often have limited access to quality education, further diminishing their prospects in a technology-driven economy. Government policy is critical in managing the relationship between technology and wealth inequality. Policies aimed at encouraging innovation and technological adoption can stimulate economic growth, but they must be carefully crafted to ensure that the benefits of growth do not disproportionately favor the wealthy. This requires investment in public services such as education and infrastructure, establishing safety nets for displaced workers, and designing regulations that foster competitive markets while protecting workers' rights. The complex relationship between technology and wealth inequality raises moral questions about the kind of society we wish to build for the future. Ethical considerations involve the fair distribution of the fruits of technological advancement and ensuring that technology serves as a tool for societal improvement rather than a mechanism for deepening economic divisions. Discussions often center around corporate responsibility and the role corporations should play in ensuring their technological advancements do not exacerbate social inequalities. Looking forward, the trajectory of wealth inequality in the context of technology's influence on the economy will likely be shaped by a combination of market forces, societal values, and government policy. Understanding technology's role in the economy is not just an academic exercise, it is a prerequisite for informed decision-making in both the public and private sectors. As technology continues to evolve at a rapid pace, the stakeholders charged with governance must adapt equally quickly to mitigate its potential negative impacts and harness its power for the greater good. The challenges are significant, but so too are the opportunities to create a more equitable and prosperous society through thoughtful engagement with the tools and capabilities technology provides. 7.6 The myth and reality of social mobility. Wealth inequality in the United States is a multifaceted issue that cannot be addressed without delving into the concept of social mobility. Social mobility refers to the ability of an individual or group to move within or between social strata in a society. The notion of the American dream propounds the idea that hard work, ambition, and talent lead to upward social mobility regardless of social class at birth. This mythos has been a fundamental part of American cultural identity, suggesting that everyone has an equal opportunity to improve their socioeconomic status. However, the reality is more complicated and less optimistic. The state of social mobility in modern-day America indicates that the country's deeply rooted belief in meritocracy is at odds with the statistical data. While there are narratives of individuals who rise from poverty to wealth, these are exceptions rather than the rule. Several factors contribute to the stagnation of social mobility, including income inequality, education disparity, neighborhood segregation, and inheritance of wealth. The concentration of resources and opportunities in the hands of a few limits the ability of larger populations to climb the socioeconomic ladder. Education is often proposed as the great equalizer, purported to provide individuals with the skills required to improve their economic standing. However, access to quality education is highly unequal in the United States. Factors such as funding for public schools, which is significantly influenced by local taxes, result in stark disparities between schools in affluent and poor neighborhoods. Furthermore, the rising costs of higher education have made college degrees inaccessible to many or burden students with substantial debt, potentially counteracting the economic benefits of the degree itself. The role of higher education in social mobility is further complicated by the quality of institutions and the networking opportunities they provide. Individuals from higher socioeconomic backgrounds are more likely to attend prestigious universities, which in turn offer better job prospects and connections. The stratification of educational institutions perpetuates the gap between the wealthy and the poor, as those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds often do not have the same access to high-paying careers. The employment market plays its role in hindering social mobility. While it's true that job availability fluctuates with economic cycles, the types of jobs available have also changed. There has been a hollowing out of middle-income jobs, partly due to automation and globalization, which has resulted in a polarized job market consisting of high-wage, high-skilled jobs and low-wage, low-skilled jobs. This polarization makes it more challenging for individuals who start in low-income brackets to move into higher-wage positions. In addition to the factors that directly impact an individual's ability to move up the socioeconomic ladder, social mobility is also influenced by the broader economic environment. Wealth concentration at the top can lead to economic policies favoring the affluent, perpetuating a system where the rich get richer. Tax codes, labor laws, and corporate governance that favor wealth accumulation among the wealthy hamper the ability of the less affluent to ascend economically. The myth of social mobility in America also ignores the impact of social capital. Social capital is the network of relationships among people who live and work in a particular society. It enables individuals to achieve certain gains within their community. Yet, it is not equally available to everyone. Individuals born into families with a higher stock of social capital have better access to job opportunities, mentors, and financial resources through their established networks, which often leads to better outcomes in education and employment. Racial inequality is tightly interwoven with economic inequality and is a significant barrier to social mobility in the United States. For example, Black Americans and other minorities have historically been subjected to discriminatory policies, such as redlining and segregation, which have limited their access to wealth-generating opportunities such as housing and quality education. These disadvantages accumulate over generations and create a formidable barrier to upward mobility. Gender disparity is another factor that impacts social mobility. Despite significant strides toward gender equality, women in the United States continue to face challenges that can limit their social mobility. Occupational segregation, the gender pay gap, and the lack of support for working mothers, such as affordable childcare and paid family leave, are all barriers that women confront. These systemic issues can prevent women from reaching their full economic potential. Another aspect that undercuts the notion of social mobility is the healthcare system. Medical expenses are a leading cause of bankruptcy in the United States. Lack of access to affordable healthcare can keep families in a cycle of poverty and prevent individuals from pursuing education or employment opportunities. Conversely, those with greater wealth have better access to healthcare, which can improve their quality of life and ability to work, further enhancing their economic status. Furthermore, the role of personal circumstances should not be overlooked when considering social mobility. Individual traits such as physical and mental health, personality, and life choices do influence outcomes. However, the promise of the American dream suggests these individual factors should be the primary determinants of one's socioeconomic standing, overshadowing the systemic barriers that play a significant role. The perpetuation of the myth of social mobility can have harmful consequences. It may lead to an underestimation of the gravity of wealth inequality and the structural changes that are required to address it. If the belief persists that individuals are solely responsible for their socioeconomic status without considering the systemic barriers in place, it hinders societal recognition of the need for reform. Examining the interplay between structure and agency in social mobility is essential. While personal resilience and effort are noteworthy, they cannot be the sole focus in the discussion on economic progression. The structural factors such as economic policies, institutional practices, and cultural norms that hinder or facilitate social mobility must also be acknowledged. Only then can policies be designed to create a more level playing field. The concept of social mobility and the surrounding myth of unlimited opportunity form an intricate part of understanding wealth inequality in America. To work towards true social mobility, it is necessary to scrutinize and reform the economic and social structures that stand in the way. Debunking the myth does not negate the idea that individuals can rise through the ranks, but it does call for a more nuanced and realistic examination of the American socioeconomic landscape. Only through this lens can the deep-rooted and complex issue of wealth inequality be effectively addressed. 7.7 Corporate Influence on Economic Policy. Wealth inequality in the United States has expanded at an alarming rate, and many researchers and analysts have traced the trajectory back to variances in economic policy. It is crucial to understand the role that corporate influence has had on these policies. Historically, corporations have exerted power on economic policymaking through various means, which include lobbying, campaign contributions, and the revolving door of employment between corporate entities and government positions. These methods can sidetrack public interest in favor of corporate gains and contribute to policies that may inadvertently promote wealth inequality. Lobbying is the process by which corporations communicate with lawmakers to influence their stance on pending legislation. It is a legal activity protected by the First Amendment, which allows for petitioning the government. However, the scale at which corporations can engage in lobbying efforts vastly outstrips the resources available to average citizens. Corporations fund lobbying agencies to maintain a constant presence in Washington, D.C., where they advocate for policies that benefit their bottom lines. This has significant implications on economic policy, as lobby groups can secure subsidies, tax breaks, or deregulations that advantage the wealthy, in effect widening the wealth gap. Campaign contributions provide another avenue for corporations to sway policy direction. While direct contributions to candidates from corporations are illegal following the Tillman Act of 1907, subsequent laws and court decisions, including the pivotal Citizens United v. FEC case, have weakened restrictions, enabling corporations to spend through political action committees, PACs, and other indirect methods. Campaign finance has thus become a critical element in the establishment of economic policy, as politicians, who rely on such contributions for electoral success, may become beholden to their corporate donors, prioritizing legislation that aligns with corporate interests. The revolving door between corporate jobs and government positions further complicates matters. Individuals frequently transition between high-level corporate positions and government offices, influencing policy decisions through their experience and connections. This can lead to a scenario where former corporate executives serving in public roles craft policies that are favorable to businesses, possibly at the cost of the greater economic equality. The presence of ex-corporate leaders in regulatory bodies can result in weaker enforcement of regulations and oversight, further benefiting corporate interests and contributing to wealth inequality. Furthermore, corporate influence has led to a significant transformation in tax policies. Over the past few decades, tax rates for the wealthiest individuals and corporations have generally decreased. For example, tax cuts such as those enacted through the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 largely benefited large corporations and wealthy individuals, providing them with significant savings. The logic often presented is that such tax breaks will trickle down, stimulating investment and job creation. However, this trickle-down effect is highly debated, and many argue that it exacerbates wealth inequality by providing more resources to those at the top, resources that often do not proportionally benefit the middle and lower socioeconomic classes. Another aspect of corporate influence on economic policy is the promotion of trade deals, which can be beneficial for corporate expansion, but detrimental to local economies and workers. Agreements like the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, ostensibly aim to increase trade by eliminating tariffs and barriers, but they can also lead to job losses in industries that relocate to countries with cheaper labor costs. While corporate profits may soar as a result of such policies, the same cannot necessarily be said for wages and employment rates, which can stagnate or fall, exacerbating wealth disparities. Corporate influence can also extend to the suppression of wage growth. By influencing labor-related legislation, corporations can steer policy in ways that limit labor rights or impede the formation of unions. This weakens collective bargaining power, which traditionally pushed for higher wages and better working conditions. Furthermore, lobbying against increases in the minimum wage can directly impact income inequality. For many years, the federal minimum wage has remained unchanged, and the purchasing power has eroded with inflation, directly affecting the economic standing of the lowest earners. Deregulation is another significant policy area where corporate lobbying has played a role. The argument for deregulation is that it reduces the burden on businesses, allowing for increased efficiency and lower prices for consumers. However, when industries are deregulated, corporations often increase profits without necessarily passing on savings to consumers, which leads to greater corporate wealth and, by extension, higher income to the executives and shareholders. Deregulation can also lead to less competition and higher barriers to entry, which can concentrate wealth in the hands of a few corporations, exacerbating wealth inequality. Corporate influence extends to public services and infrastructure projects. Through what are referred to as public-private partnerships, PPPs, corporations can take on roles traditionally held by the public sector, often in exchange for tax incentives or other benefits. While these partnerships can be efficient, they also often prioritize profit over public good, potentially diverting resources away from public services that could benefit the wider population, particularly those of lower socioeconomic status, and concentrating wealth in corporate hands. Additionally, companies sometimes leverage their influence to protect their interests by championing policies that preserve intellectual property rights and patents. This defense of intellectual property can stifle competition and innovation by keeping prices high for patented products, such as prescription drugs. Such actions keep profits within a small sector of the economy, primarily the owners and investors of these corporations, and limit access for the broader population. Addressing these issues is not straightforward, partly because of the immense resources corporations can deploy towards maintaining their influence on policy. To counteract corporate influence, advocates suggest reforms such as increased transparency in campaign finance, stricter lobbying regulations, and closing the revolving door between corporate and government positions. It's also proposed to strengthen antitrust laws to prevent monopolistic practices that concentrate wealth, and to bolster labor rights to ensure fair wages and the preservation of a middle-class workforce. Moreover, policies focusing on tax fairness, better regulation and oversight of financial markets, and investment in public services and infrastructure are also seen as ways to counterbalance corporate influence. By ensuring that wealth produced within the economy benefits a wider cross-section of the population, such steps may help to mitigate the widening wealth gap. As wealth inequality continues to grow, the public discourse on corporate influence on economic policy becomes increasingly vital. It involves questions about the core values and principles democratic societies choose to prioritize, whether voices of corporations or citizens weigh more significantly in policymaking, and how the balance between private profit and public interest is maintained. It remains a challenging topic, with pragmatic considerations often at odds with idealistic goals, but it is a conversation that is essential for the health and equity of the United States' economic future. 7.8 Movements Fighting Economic Injustice. The stark realities of wealth inequality in the United States have given rise to a diverse range of movements aimed at addressing the growing economic chasm. These movements are not monolithic. They vary widely in terms of tactics, scope, and specific objectives. However, what unifies them is a shared recognition that economic injustice undermines the fabric of democracy and the idea of equal opportunity. From grassroots organizations to nationwide campaigns, the movements fighting economic injustice harness the power of collective action and policy advocacy to push for systemic change. One prominent example of these movements is the Fight for $15 campaign, which originated in 2012. This labor movement, backed by a coalition of workers, unions, and social activists, campaigns for a $15 minimum wage for all workers across the country. Despite significant resistance from some business groups and political figures, the movement has achieved notable successes, including the gradual adoption of higher minimum wages in several states and cities. The push for a living wage reflects a fundamental challenge to the status quo of labor compensation and aims to address income disparity at the lower end of the economic spectrum. Another influential player in the fight against wealth inequality is the Occupy Wall Street movement. Though it has diminished in visibility since its peak in 2011, the impact of its central message, encapsulated in the slogan, "We are the 99%, persists. The movement spotlighted the concentration of wealth among the top 1% of Americans and the influence this economic elite wields over politics and policy. While critics have pointed to a lack of centralized leadership and clear policy goals, supporters contend that Occupy brought much-needed attention to the issue of wealth concentration and laid the groundwork for future activism. The realm of economic justice movements is not limited to labor and anti-corporate activism. The concept of universal basic income, UBI, has gained traction, supported by a diverse coalition that includes tech entrepreneurs, economists, and social welfare advocates. The UBI movement calls for a fundamental restructuring of the social safety net by providing all citizens with a guaranteed, no-strings-attached sum of money sufficient to cover basic needs. Advocates argue that UBI could reduce poverty and mitigate the effects of job displacement due to automation and global outsourcing. While still a subject of intense debate, pilot programs and research on UBI are expanding, reflecting a growing appetite for innovative approaches to economic redistribution. Environmental movements have increasingly foregrounded the intersection of economic and ecological justice. Groups like the Sunrise Movement advocate for policies such as the Green New Deal, which seeks to address climate change while generating economic growth through investment in sustainable industries and infrastructure. Crucially, the Green New Deal emphasizes the creation of well-paying jobs and aims to ensure that the transition to a green economy doesn't leave marginalized communities behind, an explicit nod to the principles of economic justice. The legacy of civil rights activism continues to shape contemporary movements that emphasize the inseparable ties between racial and economic justice. Organizations such as the NAACP and newer entities like Black Lives Matter stress the disproportionate impact of economic inequality on communities of color. They advocate for policies that aim not only to reform policing and the criminal justice system, but to also dismantle systemic barriers that obstruct access to quality education, employment, and housing. By highlighting how racial disparities intersect with economic ones, these groups argue for a holistic approach to social justice reform. Women's rights organizations also contribute to the larger tapestry of movements tackling economic injustice. The gender pay gap remains a significant issue, with women, particularly women of color, earning less on average than their male counterparts for equivalent work. Additionally, women disproportionately bear the brunt of unpaid labor and face greater economic insecurity, especially in single-parent households. Movements such as Time's Up advocate for equal pay, combat workplace discrimination, and support policies that address the economic challenges unique to women and families. At the intersection of technology and social justice, there are movements like Code for America that address economic inequality through the lens of digital access and literacy. By advocating for open government data and the democratization of technology, these groups seek to empower citizens to better utilize public services and engage with civic processes. They argue that enhancing digital inclusivity can break down barriers to economic participation and promote more equitable access to opportunities. The push for financial regulatory reform is another crucial facet of the economic justice movement. Following the 2008 financial crisis, activist groups have called for stricter oversight of the banking and financial sectors to prevent predatory lending, reckless investment practices, and other behaviors that can exacerbate wealth inequality. The movement for financial reform also emphasizes the need to rein in the political influence of financial institutions, as seen in advocacy for campaign finance reform and greater transparency in political donations. Grassroots cooperative movements have emerged as a response to corporate consolidation and the perceived failings of the traditional capitalist model. By promoting worker-owned businesses and cooperative models of ownership and governance, these groups aim to foster more equitable economic structures. Proponents of cooperatives argue that such arrangements lead to fairer distribution of profits, more democratic workplaces, and increased community resilience. Educational advocacy groups are also integral to the struggle against economic injustice. Organizations that push for greater funding of public education, equitable resource distribution, and reform of student loan policies contend that access to affordable quality education is a cornerstone of economic mobility. Advocates point out that disparities in educational opportunities reinforce existing income inequalities and advocate for policies that ensure all children, regardless of socioeconomic background, can succeed academically. The movements fighting economic injustice are as varied as the aspects of the issue they seek to address. Through persistent advocacy, protest, policy proposals, and community organizing, these movements operate both within and outside traditional political structures to engender change. As each movement brings its own unique perspective and set of solutions to the forefront, they collectively underscore the urgency of tackling the multifaceted problem of wealth inequality. While success is far from guaranteed, the persistence and growth of these movements reflect a shared belief in the possibility of creating a fairer economic system that serves the needs of all citizens. 7.9 Public Health and Wealth Inequality. Wealth inequality is not merely a financial issue, but one that permeates the social fabric, particularly in the sphere of public health. The conditions in which people are born, grow, live, and age are intimately connected with their socioeconomic status, and consequently with their health outcomes. The disparities in wealth that are evident in the American society mirror the disparities in health outcomes among different population groups. It is widely recognized that those with lower income and wealth have worse health outcomes compared to their wealthier counterparts. This is visible through several indicators, including life expectancy, prevalence of chronic diseases, and access to health services. In the American context, wealth inequality affects health through multiple pathways. Inadequate access to healthcare services is a predominant issue for those with lower incomes. The high cost of health insurance, the lack of insurance coverage, and the underfunding of public health services create barriers to obtaining necessary care. People in lower economic strata often delay seeking medical attention due to the cost, which can lead to the exacerbation of minor health issues into serious and chronic conditions. The economic impact of falling sick can be devastating for a low-income family, potentially resulting in a slide into deeper poverty. Environmental factors also play a critical role. Poorer communities often face greater exposure to environmental hazards, such as pollutants in air and water, which can lead to health issues including asthma, cancer, and lead poisoning. These communities also have limited access to clean and safe recreational facilities, parks, and supermarkets with nutritious food options. The lack of access to healthy food contributes to malnutrition, obesity, diabetes, and other diet-related diseases, which further compound their health disparities. Education is another area where the link between wealth and health is evident. Higher levels of education usually result in better health outcomes, but the opportunity to obtain quality education is unequal. Those from wealthier families benefit from well-funded schools, access to advanced educational materials, and a conducive learning environment. On the other hand, schools in poorer neighborhoods often suffer from limited resources, which can affect the quality of education and subsequently the health literacy of individuals. Health literacy is critical in managing one's health, understanding health risks, and making informed decisions about healthcare services. Psychosocial stress is another consequence of wealth inequality that can degrade health. The uncertainties associated with financial instability, job insecurity, and lack of social safety nets can lead to chronic stress, anxiety, and depression. Chronic stress impacts the body in various ways, including an increased risk of heart disease and other stress-related conditions. Stress can affect behaviors too, leading individuals to engage in unhealthy practices such as smoking, binge drinking, or overeating as coping mechanisms. Wealth inequality also influences health outcomes across different life stages. For example, during childhood, the lack of resources can impact physical growth and cognitive development. Children in low-income families may experience inadequate nutrition, exposure to toxins, and stress from unstable housing or familial financial hardship. Such conditions set the stage for poor health and limited opportunities in later life, perpetuating a cycle of poverty and ill health. During working age, lower-income individuals often hold jobs that are physically demanding, expose them to harmful substances, or involve irregular hours, which can all negatively impact their health. In later life, lower wealth translates to fewer resources to draw upon for quality elder care and medical expenses that typically increase with age. Access to preventative services is another area where wealth plays a pivotal role. Preventive healthcare aims to prevent diseases before they occur, which can lead to a healthier population and reduce healthcare costs over time. However, individuals from lower socioeconomic groups often have lower utilization rates of preventive services due to costs, lack of awareness, or limited access. This foregone care can result in the late detection of diseases like cancer and diabetes, where early intervention can be critical for improved outcomes and reduced mortality. The current healthcare financing system in the United States is heavily influenced by wealth and income. It is a complex mix of employer-provided insurance, private insurance, and government programs like Medicare and Medicaid. Those without employer-provided insurance may find private insurance unaffordable and not qualify for government programs, leaving them without coverage. Even with insurance, the out-of-pocket costs associated with deductibles, copayments, and uncovered services can be substantial, deterring individuals from seeking care. This system underscores how wealth can determine the quantity and quality of healthcare an individual receives. Furthermore, wealth inequality can also affect the overall economy and society's ability to fund public health initiatives. As wealth concentrates among a small percentage of the population, there is less purchasing power among the majority. This not only affects economic growth, but may also limit government tax revenues, which are often used to fund public health programs. The underfunding of these programs can lead to a reduction in the quality of services and the availability of resources necessary to maintain a healthy population. Lastly, the psychological and social impact of wealth inequality should not be underestimated in considering public health consequences. Individuals who are continuously exposed to societal reminders of economic disparity may experience feelings of relative deprivation. This psychological state, where individuals perceive themselves as lesser in comparison to a more affluent reference group, has been tied to negative health outcomes. Additionally, substantial wealth inequality can result in social fragmentation and reduced social cohesion, which are important factors in maintaining a supportive community that can promote health. When addressing wealth inequality and its impact on public health, it is essential to consider multifaceted solutions. These include proposals for healthcare reform that reduce the economic barriers to accessing care, investment in education and environmental improvements for low-income communities, enactment of policies aimed at reducing wealth concentration, and efforts to enhance social safety nets. The health of a nation is a reflection of the well-being of its individual members, and as such, the pursuit of greater health equity is a testament to the collective value placed on each life. By considering these numerous dimensions through which wealth inequality affects public health in the United States, it becomes clear that efforts to mitigate these disparities must be comprehensive and targeted. Policy interventions aimed solely at one aspect may fail to capture the interconnected nature of health, wealth, and inequality. Policymakers, community leaders, healthcare providers, educators, and citizens must all play a part in this challenging yet vital endeavor of diminishing health disparities and fostering a more equitable, healthy society for all. 7.10 Economic Reforms, Theory and Practice. Wealth inequality presents significant challenges and incites debate over potential economic reforms that may offer solutions. The discourse surrounding economic reforms often revolves around the theoretical foundations of policies and the pragmatic aspects of their implementation. Historically, the United States has witnessed various shifts in policy designed to address economic disparities. These measures range from tax reforms, wage laws, social programs, to corporate regulations. They are subject to extensive political debate, often revealing competing ideologies and approaches to achieving economic equity. Economic reforms are propelled by the ambition to establish a more equitable society, where prosperity is not confined to a concentrated stratum, but is instead dispersed broadly across the population. Economic reform theories often begin with the examination of existing fiscal structures, including the taxation system. Progressive taxation, for instance, is posited on the principle of taxing individuals based on their ability to pay. This theory suggests that higher income earners should contribute a larger percentage of their income to the tax base, which, in turn, could be utilized to fund social services and welfare programs. These types of reforms aim to reduce the after-tax income inequality by redistributing wealth from the top earners to those with lesser income. Advocates of progressive taxation argue that it fosters a fairer economic system, whereas opponents often claim it acts as a disincentive for wealth creation and economic growth. Apart from taxation, wage laws, including minimum wage statutes, are also a focus of economic reforms. Setting a minimum wage aims to ensure that workers receive a base level of income that meets the standard cost of living. Proponents argue that a higher minimum wage could lift low-income workers out of poverty, reduce the wage gap, and stimulate consumer spending, driving economic growth. Critics, on the other hand, argue that increasing the minimum wage could lead to reduced employment opportunities, as businesses may offset the increased labor costs by hiring fewer workers or resorting to automation. Social programs such as healthcare, education, and unemployment benefits are significant components of economic reform, with the potential to level economic disparities when effectively administered. By providing access to essential services, social programs can mitigate the impact of poverty and create opportunities for upward mobility. However, the efficacy of these programs is contingent upon efficient delivery, adequate funding, and ensuring that they reach the individuals who are most in need. The debate often centers on how to optimize these programs to both empower individuals and encourage self-sufficiency, while not creating dependencies that can deter individual economic initiatives. Corporate regulations aimed at limiting monopolistic behaviors and ensuring fair competition likewise contribute to economic reform efforts. By preventing the aggregation of market power in a few hands, antitrust laws aim to protect consumers and smaller businesses, potentially leading to a more equitable distribution of income. However, establishing the balance between regulating to prevent abuse of power and stifling innovation and enterprise with overregulation is complex. The debates here involve striking an optimal balance that fosters competition without burdening business operations with excessive compliance costs. Further reform measures relate to financial systems and the availability of credit. Inequality can be exacerbated by the uneven access to financial services, where the wealthy have greater access to credit, investment opportunities, and other financial products. Financial reforms may include provisions to ensure fair lending practices, provide financial education, and facilitate access to banking services for underprivileged communities. These reforms aim to democratize financial opportunities and enable broader participation in wealth creation. Education as a public investment is a crucial aspect of economic reform geared towards reducing long-term inequality. By prioritizing education, particularly in early childhood and primary education, policy reformists endeavor to establish a more level playing field. Education can allow individuals from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds to acquire skills and knowledge that enhance employability and earning potential. However, educational reforms must tackle resource disparities between schools, quality of instruction, and barriers to access to be genuinely transformative. Political engagement and lobbying practices also come under the purview of economic reform. There is a growing concern that the influence of affluent individuals and corporations in political decision-making perpetuates policies favorable to the wealthy. Campaign finance reforms that aim to limit the financial influence in politics could potentially reduce the policy bias that may escalate wealth inequality. Additionally, measures such as guaranteed basic income or negative income tax are being explored as more radical economic reforms. These ideas, which involve providing individuals with a basic stipend or tax credits regardless of employment status, challenge conventional notions of welfare and the labor market. Their goal is to ensure a standard of living above the poverty line for all citizens. While these proposals promise to substantially reduce poverty and access to basic necessities, they are subject to intense debate on their likely impacts, feasibility, and the potential effects on incentive structures. Finally, international economic policies and trade agreements can influence domestic inequality. The negotiation of fair trade agreements, aid to developing nations, and regulation of multinational corporations are discussions related to economic reform that have implications for wealth distribution both domestically and globally. The complex interplay between international competition, labor markets, and economic policy requires a nuanced approach, aiming to benefit the domestic economy while fulfilling global responsibilities. The endeavor to reform economic policies is multifaceted, not only because of the inherent complexities of the issues, but also due to the varying implications for different segments of society. As we explore options and chart potential paths forward, we must consider the broader context in which these reforms unfold. The effects of globalization, technological advancement, demographic changes, and environmental imperatives must all be accounted for in crafting economic policies that not only strive for greater equality, but also ensure sustainable growth and resilience in the face of future challenges. Economic reform is a vital component in the pursuit of a more equitable society, but it requires rigorous analysis, careful design, and a willingness to adapt theories to practical realities.